Today is a bit of a rainy day, and it's the day I'm going to finish tuning up the little red truck. I can't believe I let it go for so long. The spark plug on the right is probably about double or triple the gap. I've been having some performance issues for about 6 months more. Yeah, being older, I guess I got a little more cautious and afraid of doing things like this. But I'm going to step up again and, reevaluate and rehabilitate my mechanic skills. I used to work as a mechanic in the 80s. Completely different machine these days. We got individual coil packs. When I worked at Tune Up Masters for Andy Grababelli, we used to do real tune-ups, with points, distributor caps, rotors, timing light. I have a timing light and a dwell meter. All those skills are probably not really all that relevant unless you have a nice vintage automobile. But some of the basics are the same. Got to gap them, or at least check the gap. They come pre-gapped supposedly, but yeah, you at least check it. But look at that. That's terrible. I'm such a neglectful individual when it comes to that. But I'm stepping up now that I've, moved out here, and yeah, I got to step it up. Yeah. So what I'm working on today is a Dodge 1500 2005 with a 3.7 liter engine. Not a bad truck. I mean, it's got all kinds of stuff. It got the air conditioning condenser there. Yeah, and power steering cooler on the bottom, a transmission cooler right there in the front, and the radiator right behind it all. It's a bit of a modern engine that I'm not really familiar with. Right here is a coil pack, and it's working triple duty as of late, well, for a while now, trying to gap those extraordinary gap on those spark plugs. So what you got to do in order to get into this thing, well, first you had to take the all the air filtration units off, the air intake, and you need a 10 millimeter bolt right down in there. See if we can't see one right there. 10 millimeter bolt, nut rather. That's a stud into the engine block, and then pull this cable here out of here, and then wiggle back and forth, and pull that up, and then take out the spark plug, put a new one in, and put it all back together. In all, it's not that bad. It's just getting behind the fire, and right up next to the firewall there, and getting that far one. I end up doing those ones first because they're the hardest to get them out of the way. But it's really not that bad. I mean, once you start getting into it, I don't know why I was so daunted, apprehensive even, when it comes to working on these newer engines. But I'll get over it. A part of being self-sufficient is, doing things that you haven't done before, or haven't done in a very long while. Well, alrighty then. There's old school pneumatic tool. Been sitting in my toolbox for maybe about 35 years. See if we can't get it on there. And now that that's off, wiggle it back and forth a little bit with a little upward pressure. And what we have here is a very overworked coil pack. Each cylinder has its own coil. Wow, the future. Well, coming from a man who lives in the past, that's the future. Well, 2 more to go. All right, so I like to get the ones in the back first. I don't know if you can see with the shadow, but I'm working the, broke it with a wrench. Now I'm done pulling the plug out. I have a vintage spark plug socket with a rubber insert that kind of holds the old spark plug in place. My biggest concern was putting in the new spark plugs. So the rubber insert in there is pretty soft. You can soften those up with something called AT205 reseal. You can just soak it in there, take the rubber piece out, soak it for a bit, and it'll actually refurbish that rubber piece. And that's what I ended up doing, because what I was afraid of is when I put the new spark plug in, right? And then I tighten it down, and then I pull, that what would happen is that would pull right out and leave the socket on there. That's a big concern. And then I'd end up with a socket down in that well that I'd have to manage to pull out somehow. I figured I would just put some kind of a silicone sealant on there, let it sit for a few hours and give it a tug. But it hasn't been an issue. I've been wiggling it back and forth as I pull up. That was just like I said, I was apprehensive. I overthink things and I worry too much when I should really just be getting my hands dirty. So basically, with all the right extensions and the right tools, these are some vintage Craftsman things that I got in the mid 80s when I was working actively as a mechanic. Served me well. Craftsman, a lot of people got the Snap-on. I've always been a little bit practical, if not cheap, and I didn't get the Snap-on. These last just as long. Lifetime warranty. Still honored. I still use it now and again. Decent tool for the price. Made in the USA back in the 80s. Not so much anymore. When I do a replacement on some tools, like my sockets and whatnot, I'll go on eBay and I'll spend maybe $10 just for a socket just because it was made in the USA. And it matches my set, whereas the Taiwan or Chinese or whatever socket wouldn't match. Yeah, a little OCD there. Like I say, overthink things. Anyways, let's break this. When I mean break it, I mean break it loose. And there it is. I didn't even break a knuckle. Well, I do have a little bit of a, yeah, that happens just about every time. Anyway, I take it off after it's been broken loose. I take my gloved hand because, you know, I got extra grippage. And then I work it out by hand from here. So here's my vintage toolbox that I had used as a mechanic. It was sitting in for 35 years and it got, it got corroded, nasty. So I ended up taking it apart and repainting it. I think I did a fairly decent job. I covered up the stick, well, it's not a sticker, that's more of a placard riveted on. I painted the inside. I got a new tray because the tray was just trashed. This one's cleaned up nicely. I didn't need to repaint it. You can see the difference in color. That's more of a darker gray. That's a lighter gray. But the next thing that needs to happen is you need to check the gap on the spark plug. And what you do is you take, well, the specifications are, in this truck, it's posted right there. Spark plug gap. Yep. And it even tells you what spark plug, that's the manufacturer spark plug. And I shame to admit it, but those are the exact plugs that were in here. I don't think that I ever replaced these plugs. You're supposed to replace them before 100,000. I'm 20,000 miles out from that. Sometimes you have to replace them at 60,000. I think that would be better, judging by the gap on these particular plugs. They are very worn at 120,000 miles. I should be ashamed of myself. Anyways, you find the particular gauge and, well, you stick it in there, and it's called a feeler gauge. It should just like scrape in there ever so slightly. Can't do it with one hand, but I'm going to do that on all three of them, make sure that they're 40. They've been, the last three that I've done on the other side, they were right on, more or less. Far better than these. These are ridiculous and very shameful. I shouldn't let my my fears and my apprehensions get ahead of me. But anyways, these are the NGK. These are the consumer brand, the V-Power. These are these are actually the OEM spark plug, but under a different name, and far cheaper, I would imagine. I could have went with like a platinum plug or some other plug, but I figured if they're 120,000 miles, these plugs have served. And if the truck lasts, I'm certainly going to put it on my calendar or in the back of my mind to do these in next 60,000 miles. Now, I like to get these hand tight and carefully start the threads, get them all the way down, just like that, before I tighten them. Now, tightening them, you don't have to put a whole lot of torque on these things. They're not really meant for that. They have a crush washer around the base of the spark plug. And the idea is just to get it tight enough, you know, get it hand tight, you know, just a little crank on it. Because you're going to want to take these out again. Yeah, if you're not a big fat coward like I was. Yeah. So just tighten them down ever so much with just a little bit. I have to get that position so that, because I just had them set for taking out, and they're already grabbing on that. And just you can do this one-handed because you're not going to put a whole lot of torque on it. Got a little extra long wrench here. I have to keep that in consideration when I'm tightening these because it's easy to. There we go. See, and that's probably good. Now, this is the part that really inhibited me from doing this, was the fear of having to go in there, and so I pull. See how that one came out? Get it loose. Come on now. Don't do what I don't want you to do. And it came out. See? Nothing to be afraid of. Even if it did get stuck in there, I could get it out. All right, now that the spark plugs have been replaced, put this coil pack back in there. Well, it goes over the spark plug and sets right in there with this stud. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a stud right there that holds it all in place. And then there's a little bolt, 10mm bolt, that goes on top of that. I just finger tighten it down, and then I come in with my pneumatic and give it a snug, just like that. So one of the things I noticed is that the intake manifold is plastic. The future. Anyhow, I took off this bracket in order to get to this spark plug, and it screws into plastic. I took it off with the pneumatic, but it wouldn't be prudent to do so Anyways, it takes a Torx bit, and I'm not sure what exactly Torx I have here. But anyways, it's a Torx bit, and I'm going to do this one by hand. Because, you know, plastic, you don't need much tightening. I'm always afraid to tighten plastic. And there it is. And that's basically the bracket for the intake box, which I'm going to put on next. And of course, don't forget to reattach any of the electrical things that you detach to get the air intake off. There's a sensor in there, and I'm sure if this was not attached, it would throw a code. Engine light might come on. Yeah, I almost forgot that. Yep. And next is just putting on the air filter assembly. I'm torn whether or not to put a new air filter in. Yesterday I completed the oil change. Air filter didn't seem that bad, but just for the course, I'm going to put a new air filter in there, just the same. Can't tell you why, but I've always liked the Fram brand of filters. I have a Fram oil filter in here as well. I'm not sure if it makes any difference at all, actually. Probably doesn't. Make sure I don't have any tools in my little toolbox down here. That's what I use it for sometimes, at least this time. And it just sits right in there. And my other toolbox here with the screwdriver I need to attach it with. There's just some clips that goes into my other tool holder right there. Very convenient. I think that's why they have these two walls right here so you can put tools in there. That's very thoughtful of them, I think. You can slide that on there, get it nice and tight, and then wiggle that on. The clip's in there. I actually bought a clip on eBay because somewhere in Arizona I was taking this apart and pop, clip went somewhere. It's down in the bowels of the truck somewhere to this day, maybe, if not on a freeway. Well, it's all done. That's what she wrote. Got that tool check done. Got the dielectric grease on the negative battery terminal. Always take that off in case you spark something in there. These computerized cars, oh boy, that would be expensive. The last thing to do is to install a little bit of paper towel here in this groove. That's what this groove is for. They engineered it just for this paper towel that you can fold up. And yeah, it's very important to have there, especially in an older vehicle. Got to install that paper towel. It's just a must. Well, I want to thank you very much for watching and enduring through this with me. Bit humid out, got beads of sweat, probably more than you need to hear. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.